I'm Rowan Harlan, 27 years old. On Christmas Eve, my parents tossed my clothes onto the snowy lawn and told me I was being dramatic. They said they needed my room for their successful son. They deadbolted the door while I stood there in house socks, watching the heat bleed out through the crack like it didn't belong to me anymore. They thought I would crawl back. They thought I would beg. They thought I would disappear. Instead, I kept the only thing they respected: paperwork. 5 years later, a foreclosure notice showed up with their address on it. They called me crying, asking for help, acting like we were still family. I told them I could help. I didn't tell them how. Because the bank didn't come for their home with a stranger's name on the documents. It came with mine. Christmas Eve is supposed to be a soft night. Even the air feels quieter, like it knows to behave. That year, the cold had teeth. I remember it in specifics. Because humiliation sharpens memory. The porch light was a tired yellow halo over the steps. The snow was the kind that looked clean until it touched you. Then it melted into grit and seeped through seams you didn't realize were weak. A neighbor's inflatable Santa wheezed in the wind, leaning sideways like it had given up on joy. Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon and roasting meat. Not for me, for him. My brother, Daniel. Their successful son. The one they used as a measuring stick, even when we were children. And I hadn't yet learned the math of how love could be rationed. That night, I was 22. I'd come home because my mother texted, "Come early. We're doing presents before your brother gets here." I read it as an invitation. As hope. I should have read it as scheduling. When I walked in, my father didn't hug me. He didn't even look up from the armchair where he sat with a legal pad on his knee, writing something with the slow seriousness he reserved for money and punishment. My mother stood by the kitchen island, hands dusted in flour, her lipstick too bright, like she'd dressed her face for company. They didn't ask how my job was. They didn't ask if I was eating enough. They didn't ask anything that would imply I belonged. My mother said, "You're late." I came as soon as I could, I told her. My cheeks were still stinging from the wind. The buses. "We told you to come early," she snapped, as if a bus schedule was a moral failing. My father finally looked up. His eyes slid over me, assessing. Like I was a bill that had arrived in the mail. "Go upstairs and pack," he said. I blinked. "Pack what?" "Your things," he said. Calm. The calm that meant the decision was already made and my feelings were not invited into the room. My mother set a mixing bowl down with a loud clink. "Daniel's moving back for a while. He needs your room." I laughed once because the alternative was to cry. "He has an apartment." "He sold it," my father said. "That's not—" I stopped. I could feel the trap. No matter what I argued, they'd flip it into a character flaw. Ungrateful, selfish, difficult. So I tried a different angle. "Where am I supposed to go?" My mother sighed in a way that said I was exhausting her, like she had no idea why I insisted on existing. "You're an adult. Figure it out." "What about my lease?" I said, then immediately regretted it. I didn't even have a lease. I'd moved back after community college when my roommate bailed and the rent doubled. I'd promised it was temporary. I'd been temporary for 18 months. My father's pen scratched across the legal pad. "We're done supporting you. Daniel needs stability right now." Stability. That word tasted strange in their mouths. I had been the one working 2 jobs. I had been the one paying my own phone bill and slipping my mother cash when she complained about groceries. I had been the one who learned how to be quiet when my father drank and got mean. If stability had a face, it wasn't my brother's. Still, I went upstairs. I packed because there is a particular kind of powerlessness that turns you into a machine. My hands moved without my permission. Sweaters into a duffel bag, jeans rolled tight. My childhood notebook with my name written in glitter gel pen. My cheap laptop. The envelope where I kept my pay stubs because I couldn't afford to lose proof of my own life. When I came down, Daniel's car was in the driveway already. Of course it was. He always arrived like a punchline. Too early, too loud, too confident. He walked in carrying a bottle of wine and that bright grin he wore when he wanted an audience. He paused when he saw me with bags. "Oh," he said, like I was a piece of furniture he'd forgotten existed. This happening now? My mother's face softened for him. Her voice went syrupy. Sweetheart, we didn't want you to worry. We'll have your room ready in an hour. My father stood, put his legal pad down, and clapped Daniel on the shoulder. Good to have you home, son. I waited for someone to say something human to me. A simple, I'm sorry, or even, we'll help you. Instead, my father grabbed one of my bags and carried it to the front door like he was taking out trash. My mother followed with an armful of clothes, my clothes, and before I could stop her, she opened the door and threw them onto the porch. The cold swallowed them. The snow accepted them. I stared. Are you serious? My mother's eyes flashed. Don't start. It's Christmas Eve. That made something in me go still. I stepped onto the porch, and the wind hit my bare ankles because I'd been wearing soft house socks, like a fool who thought she had a home. I picked up a sweater from the snow. My fingers burned from the cold immediately. I could hear laughter inside, Daniel talking, my mother responding like a cheerful host. My father's deep voice pleased. I turned back and said, You're kicking me out. Tonight. On Christmas Eve. My father's mouth tightened. Stop dramatizing. He said it like I was inventing the snow. Then he did one more thing. He held out a folded piece of paper toward me, like a courtroom exhibit. Sign this. What is it? I asked. Acknowledgement that you're moving out voluntarily, he said. We don't want any trouble. Trouble. From me. Like I was the problem, not the daughter standing in the cold while her family celebrated. I took the paper. The porch light lit the header. Notice of termination of occupancy. His handwriting filled the bottom margin. He'd drafted it himself, on a legal pad, like he was evicting a tenant. My name was spelled wrong. That's what I remember most clearly. Not the sting of the wind. Not the thud of my clothes hitting snow. The fact that he spelled my name wrong on the document that made me homeless. I didn't sign it. I folded it carefully, like it mattered, and slid it into my envelope of pay stubs. Receipts. Even then, I understood the language of paper. Paper is what people hide behind. Paper is what survives when stories get twisted. My mother called from inside, impatient. Close the door. You're letting the heat out. I looked at Daniel behind her. He raised his eyebrows at me, amused. Like this was just how things were. I walked down the steps with my bag biting into my shoulder. My socks soaked through instantly. Snow clung to the hem of my pants. I could feel the numbness creeping up my feet, a slow takeover, and as I reached the sidewalk, I heard the deadbolt turn. Click! A clean sound. Final. 5 years later, I would hear a different sound on a different day. A banker, on a recorded line, would say, Congratulations. The mortgage note has been assigned. You are now the lien holder. And I would smile. Not because it felt good, but because it felt correct. I spent my first night out of that house, sitting on the plastic chair of an all-night laundromat, pretending I had somewhere to be. There's a particular kind of shame in being awake while the world sleeps. You start to notice the hierarchy of comfort. Cars passing with heated seats. Couples laughing as they hustle into warm apartments. Even the stray cat that slinked behind the dumpsters had a territory it belonged to. I had a duffel bag, a tote, and an envelope of pay stubs, with a fake eviction notice folded inside it like a curse. I watched the washers churn other people's clothes, the warm fog on the glass making little halos of safety, and I made a promise I didn't say out loud. If paper is what they used to take, paper would be what I used to take back. By morning, I'd arranged a couch to crash on. A girl I knew from my second job, Mariah, let me sleep in the corner of her living room. She didn't ask too many questions, which was a kindness. Her apartment smelled like coffee and nail polish, and she kept her thermostat at a temperature that made my bones loosen for the first time in 12 hours. I woke up with pins and needles in my feet and the same thought drilling through my skull. They did this because they think I'll always come back. My mother texted once, just after noon. Don't make this harder than it has to be. We're still family. I stared at it for a full minute and then took a screenshot. I opened a folder in my phone and labeled it Receipts. I didn't know yet what I'd need. I just knew I would need something. That's how part 2 started. Not with revenge, with organization. The next weeks were survival math. Job 1 was a receptionist gig at a small medical billing office. Job 2 was evenings at a restaurant that served overpriced pasta to people who tipped like generosity was optional. I added Job 3, weekends doing basic bookkeeping for a self-employed electrician who hated spreadsheets but loved complaining. He paid in cash and called me kiddo, even though I was 22, and swallowing panic like vitamins. I opened my first business checking account in January. Not because I had a business, because I needed separation. I needed a line between what I earned and what they believed they owned. My father had always spoken about money, like it was a weapon you handed down to sons. He taught Daniel about credit scores and investments, not me. With me, he taught frugality, which is just scarcity dressed up as discipline. So I learned alone. I took free online courses at night. I watched videos about accounting, contracts, and basic real estate. I read about mortgage notes, like they were secret spells. The language was cold and precise. Lien. Assignment. Servicer. Default. Acceleration. Foreclosure. It made sense to me in a way family never did. Rules, if you understood them, stayed the same. In February, I pulled my credit report and found something that made the blood leave my face. A store credit card. Opened when I was 19. Balance. $1,840. Past due. I didn't own that card. I'd never applied. I knew immediately whose signature was on it, though. I'd seen my father sign things. Big looping letters. Arrogant. Like the world would never question him. I called the creditor and asked for the application. "Can you mail it to the address on file?" the woman asked. I said no, I don't live there anymore. The pause on the line was small, but heavy. "I can note a new address if you can verify." I verified. I waited. I received the packet 3 weeks later, at Mariah's apartment. When I opened it, there it was. My name, misspelled again. My social security number, correct. My father's handwriting, his phone number, his income. He hadn't even tried to hide it. I sat on the couch with the paper in my lap, hands shaking, and I understood something cleanly for the first time. They didn't just kick me out. They were still using me. I filed a fraud claim. I submitted the handwriting sample. I attached my old pay stubs, showing I was working 2 part-time jobs and couldn't have qualified for the credit limit they'd gotten. Then I did something else. I started keeping a binder. Not metaphorically. Literally. A thick, black, 3-ring binder with labeled tabs. Texts. Financial. Property. Legal. Mariah laughed when she saw it. "What is that? A murder file?" I said, "A protection file." She looked at me, eyes narrowing. "From who?" I didn't answer, because the truth was embarrassing. From the people who called themselves my parents. I moved into a tiny studio by April. It had a view of a brick wall and a neighbor who played bass at 2 a.m. It also had a door that locked, and no one could deadbolt me out of it. On my first night there, I sat on the floor eating microwaved rice and listening to the hum of my own refrigerator like it was a lullaby. I opened my laptop and typed out a plan. Not a dream. A plan. Step 1. Clear the fraud off my credit. Step 2. Build savings. Even if it was $20 a week. Step 3. Learn the system that makes people think they can throw you out and still sleep at night. The empire didn't start with a genius idea. It started with me realizing that I didn't have the luxury of being naive. By the end of that first year, I'd gotten a better job at a mid-sized property management company. I started as an assistant, then became the person who caught other people's mistakes. Late fees, lease violations, payment plans, tenants who cried, landlords who lied. I watched adults panic over paperwork, the way kids panic over monsters under the bed. Paper was the monster and the cure. One afternoon, my boss dropped a file on my desk and said, "You're good at this. You see patterns." Inside the file was a list of delinquent accounts and a note. Explore collection options. I stared at it, then asked, "Why don't we just sell the bad debt?" He blinked. "We do. Sometimes." "Who buys it?" I asked. He shrugged. "Investors. Collection agencies. People with more appetite for risk than me." Appetite for risk. That phrase stuck. That night, I went down a rabbit hole of debt purchasing, charged off accounts, non performing notes, discounted mortgage liens, auctions, secondary markets. It felt like standing at the edge of a dark ocean and realizing there were entire ships moving out there that you'd never noticed. I wasn't rich, not even close, but I was learning how rich people buy leverage. I didn't talk to my parents. They didn't call me on my birthday. They sent a generic card at Christmas the next year, like a corporate holiday mailer. Daniel, however, sent a message in late summer. Hey, Mom says you've been telling people we kicked you out? That's not how it happened. Don't be bitter. I read it twice, then screenshotted it and filed it under texts, right behind my mother's message about not making it harder than it had to be. The story they told themselves was already being edited, so I started building the counter story. Not with shouting, with evidence. In my third year, I formed an LLC. I named it after a street I used to walk down to calm myself when I was newly homeless. I opened a business account. I got a small line of credit. I started doing side work for landlords, helping them restructure leases, reduce vacancies, handle compliance. I took a cut. I reinvested every dollar. The empire, as people later called it, was not glamorous. It was spreadsheets at midnight. It was learning how to speak to bankers like they weren't gods. It was never deleting an email. It was scanning every signed document into 3 places. It was also, quietly, me watching my parents from a distance. Because the house they threw me out of? It wasn't paid off. I found that out the way I found out everything, through public records. One evening, on a whim, I looked up the property tax status online. Then I pulled the county recorder's records. There it was, a deed of trust recorded years ago. A lender, a balance, a refinance. They'd leveraged the house. Probably to fund Daniel's stability. Probably to keep up appearances. I printed the record and slid it into my binder under property. And that's when the trap started forming in my mind. Not a petty trap, a structural one. The kind you build with time and patience and the other person's own choices. I didn't know when it would spring. I only knew I'd be ready when it did. Year 4 was when the ground started shifting. Not dramatically at first. No cinematic music. Just small, observable cracks. The kind you notice only if you're the sort of person who has learned to study structures for weaknesses. I saw it in the payment postings at work. More late fees. More partial payment plans. More people who'd been fined for years, suddenly calling with tight voices, asking if we could waive just this one fee. When the economy coughs, landlords feel it first. Tenants feel it harder. And somewhere in that same current, my parents' house began to float a little lower. I didn't stalk them. I didn't have to. A house leaves footprints. Taxes. Liens. Notices. People think privacy is a feeling, not a legal reality. In early spring, I checked the county site like I did every few months. The property tax status was current. No new liens. But when I pulled the deed of trust record again, I noticed something different. The mortgage servicer had changed. That meant the note had been sold, bundled, transferred, or serviced under a new contract. It wasn't inherently bad. It was just movement. And movement in debt is where opportunity hides. I printed the updated assignment and slid it into the binder. Property tab, behind the original refinance. Mariah had long since stopped laughing at my binder. She'd watched me build a life out of careful decisions. She'd watched me turn fear into systems. "You still looking at their house?" she asked one night, leaning against my kitchen counter with a soda in her hand. "Yes," I said. "Why?" she pressed. Not judging. Curious. She'd earned the right to ask. I stared at my laptop screen, at the neat rows of numbers from a cash flow model I was building for a small duplex I wanted to acquire. Because they never thought I'd learn how things work. Mariah took a slow sip. "And once you know how things work, they stop feeling like gods," I said. She nodded, like that answered everything. By year 5, my LLC wasn't a side hustle anymore. I had 3 small rental properties under management, and one I partially owned with an investor who liked my spreadsheets more than he liked people. I wasn't flashy. I didn't post motivational quotes. I wore the same neutral coats and drove an old car with a reliable engine. I was building what no one could take without paperwork. Then, in late November, the first real sign arrived. Not a text, not a call, a letter. It came to my office mailbox because I'd used my business address for most financial correspondence, a habit born from the fact that I didn't trust my home address to remain private. The envelope had a bank logo and that impersonal weight that makes your stomach tighten before you even open it. It wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to occupant at my parents' address. That shouldn't have been in my mailbox at all. It was misdelivered. The kind of mistake that changes lives. I stared at it, fingers hovering. I could have returned it unopened. I could have been the ethical version of myself I used to pretend existed, back when I thought fairness mattered. Instead, I held it up to the light and saw the faint block of text through the paper. The words were blurry, but unmistakable. Notice of default. My pulse didn't race. It steadied, like a predator hearing a familiar footstep. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I took a picture of the front and back, then slid it into my bag. When I got home, I used gloves, opened it carefully, and scanned every page into a folder labeled with the date. The notice was formal, cold. It listed missed payments, the amount in arrears, fees, and a deadline for cure before acceleration. The arrears were $8,741.62. The number sat on the page like a dare. I sat at my kitchen table and read it 3 times, not because I struggled to understand it, because I needed to memorize the tone, the bank's voice, the timeline. This was not a sudden tragedy. This was a sequence. And sequences can be anticipated. I did what I always did when confronted with a system. I mapped it. Non-judicial foreclosure state. Notice of default filed. Then a waiting period. Then notice of trustee's sale. If they didn't cure, the house could be auctioned. But before that, the loan itself could be sold, especially if it was a non-performing note and the servicer wanted it off their books. That's when the real thought took shape. Not, I'll ruin them. Not, I'll make them suffer. Just, I can buy the paper, the note, the mortgage, the instrument that made the house not truly theirs. Paper is patient. Paper doesn't care who cried on the porch light. Paper cares who holds it. I didn't act immediately. I watched. In early December, I looked up the recorder's office filings again. Sure enough, the notice of default had been recorded. Public record. A time-stamped confession that my parents had stopped paying. I imagined my mother's face, the way she would try to keep her voice smooth while panic chewed through her ribs. I imagined my father's denial, the way he would insist it was a mistake, a bank error, something that happened to other people. They'd always spoken about renters with contempt. Now their house was one missed payment away from proving a point. The funniest part was this. They could have called me. They could have apologized at any point in 5 years. They could have said, "We were wrong." Instead, I got another misdelivered envelope. This one was from a law office. Foreclosure counsel. It included a loan reinstatement quote and a warning. I took pictures. Scanned, filed. I added a new tab in my binder. Foreclosure. That night, I finally received a call. My mother's number lit up my screen like a ghost. I didn't answer on the first ring. I watched it buzz. I watched it stop. Then buzz again. On the third attempt, I picked up and said, "Hello." There was a breath on the other end, too loud. Like she'd been crying or trying not to. "Hi," she said, voice brittle. "It's Mom." I let the silence sit for a beat longer than polite people allow. "What do you want?" I asked. Her tone shifted immediately into offense, like my directness was the real cruelty. "I just wanted to talk. It's Christmas soon." Of course it was. December had a way of dragging old wounds back into the light, like it enjoyed the symmetry. "I'm busy," I said. She swallowed. We're having some issues. With the house." There it was. Not an apology. Not accountability. A problem presented like a bill. "What kind of issues?" I asked, though I already knew. My mother tried to sound casual and failed. "Just paperwork. Bank stuff. Your father's handling it. Is he? I said softly. He is, she insisted. But it's stressful, and Daniel is dealing with his own things, so we can't rely on him right now. I pictured Daniel's grin on Christmas Eve, his wine bottle, his amusement, successful son, stability, then suddenly not available. And why are you calling me? I asked. Because you need something, I thought. Because you've run out of people to use. My mother's voice dropped into something closer to pleading. We thought maybe you could help. You're good with business things now, right? It wasn't a compliment. It was a lever. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the scanned notice of default on my laptop screen, the amount in arrears highlighted in yellow like a bruise. I can help, I said. Her breath hitched with relief. Oh, thank God. I knew you wouldn't turn your back on us. That line made me smile. Not warmly, precisely. I didn't say I'd do it for free, I added. The silence on the other end was immediate and heavy. My mother's voice sharpened. What do you mean? I mean, I said, calm as a spreadsheet. If you want my help, we do this correctly. Everything in writing. Full disclosure, no surprises. She exhaled, irritated, confused by the idea that I might have boundaries now. You're making it sound like a legal matter. It is a legal matter, I said. And then, gently, like I was lowering a trapdoor, I asked the question that would begin the climax. Who's your servicer? I want the loan number. My mother hesitated. The way liars hesitate before they decide which lie to use. I'll have to ask your father, she said. Do that, I replied. And email me the documents. All of them. I could hear the indignation building in her throat. Why do you need them? We're your parents. That old spell again? Family? As a substitute for accountability. I kept my voice even. Because the bank doesn't care that you're my parents. She didn't like that answer. But she needed me. So she said, clipped. Fine. I'll send what we have. We hung up. I sat there in my quiet apartment, listening to the refrigerator hum, the same sound that had once been a lullaby and was now just background noise in a life I owned. I opened my binder and ran my fingertips over the tabs. Tax, financial, property, legal, foreclosure, 5 years of paper. They had thrown me out into snow with nothing but bags and pride. They had no idea I'd been collecting the weapon they respected most. Receipts. My mother's email arrived at 6:42 a.m. The next day. Subject line. House documents. No greeting. No apology. Just a drop of files like evidence tossed on a table. Attachments. Scanned statements. A reinstatement quote from the servicer. And a letter from a foreclosure attorney that used phrases like, accelerate the debt, and trustee sale. My mother had circled numbers in pen, as if ink could argue with a contract. I printed everything. Old habit. Paper behaves better when you can spread it out and see it all at once. I laid the pages across my kitchen table and took a highlighter to the timeline. They were 4 payments behind. They'd been paying late even before that. The interest rate was higher than the original note, which meant they'd refinanced at a worse time or pulled cash out. The reinstatement quote included fees I recognized. Property inspection fees, broker price opinion fees, attorney fees. The bank's way of billing panic. I opened my laptop and created a new folder, Willow Street, Asset. Then I created a spreadsheet with 4 columns. Date, document, amount, action. Action was the only column that mattered. Step 1 was simple. Confirm whether the note could be purchased. People like my father think mortgages are personal. They think a house loan is a private agreement between them and a bank that knows their name. In reality, a mortgage is just a financial instrument, and financial instruments are traded like playing cards. I called the servicer using the number on the statement. I didn't pretend to be my mother. I didn't need to. I introduced myself as a third-party consultant exploring loss mitigation options. It's amazing what doors open when you use the right vocabulary. The representative confirmed the basics without giving me privileged information. The loan was delinquent, in foreclosure review, and yes, there were investor restrictions. That phrase told me the note was owned by someone bigger than a local bank. So I went where bigger notes go: the secondary market. Over the next week, I contacted 3 note brokers I'd learned about through industry forums and a local real estate investor group. I didn't tell them it was my parents'. I described it like any other asset: single family, owner, occupied, non performing, specific county, approximate balance. One broker replied first, brisk and curious: "If you can get the last 2 statements and the reinstatement, quote, I can tell you if it's in a pool we're offering." I stared at the email and almost laughed. My mother had unknowingly handed me the keys. I sent the statements. I sent the reinstatement, quote. I removed names, blacked out my parents' personal identifiers, and left the loan number visible where it needed to be. Business, not emotion. The system respects clean data. The broker came back the next day. It's in a non-performing pool the investor is open to moving. Not guaranteed, but possible. You'd need proof of funds, and to sign an NDA. Price would be discounted. You're looking at around 62 cents on the dollar, plus due diligence fees. 62 cents on the dollar. I ran the numbers. Unpaid principal balance, $286,400. Discounted estimate, $177,568. Add fees, reserves, servicing setup. Call it $190,000. It was a painful number, but it wasn't impossible. Not with the cash reserves I'd built, not with the credit line my LLC had, not with the quiet investor I'd partnered with before, the one who cared about returns, not stories. I called him and said, I have a note opportunity. Strong collateral. High control. He asked, what's the play? I said, buy the paper. Decide the outcome. He paused. You're sure about the borrower profile? I looked at the printed notice of default on my table, the circled arrears in my mother's handwriting, the implication that I'd be guilted into solving their mess for free. I'm sure, I said. We structured it cleanly. My LLC would be the purchasing entity, and he'd provide a portion of the capital as a secured lender to my LLC, with a fixed return. No messy partnership. No need to explain why my voice went colder when I talked about the collateral address. Then I signed the NDA, provided proof of funds, and waited while the broker did what brokers do. Pushed, negotiated, bundled the paperwork into a process that made human lives look like assets on a screen. During that time, my mother called 3 more times. First call, did you talk to the bank? Second call, your father says you're overcomplicating it. Third call, we might need you to loan us some money. Just until Daniel gets back on his feet. I didn't argue. I didn't accuse. I simply said every time, send everything in writing. My father refused to email me directly. That didn't surprise me. Men like him prefer verbal conversations. No trail, no receipts. He wanted to keep control by keeping everything foggy. So I forced clarity. When my mother asked why I needed so many documents, I said, because the only thing that matters is what's on paper. And I meant it. 2 days before Christmas, the broker sent me the purchase and sale agreement draft. I read every line. I compared it to the chain of assignments in the county records. I confirmed the servicer setup requirements. I verified the foreclosure status and the timeline for trustee sale. Then I wired the due diligence fee. The moment the wire went out, a strange calm settled in my body. Like the cold from that Christmas Eve had finally thawed into something usable. The closing happened on December 23rd. Not poetic. Exact. At 11:18 a.m., I received an email with a subject line that made my mouth go dry. Assignment of mortgage, allonge to note. The documents attached were the kind banks treat like sacred text. The note endorsement, the assignment, the servicing transfer instructions. Pages of sterile language that, in effect, said, this debt now belongs to you. I printed those too. I held the assignment in my hands and read the words slowly, letting them land. My LLC's name was there, in black and white, as the new holder of the note, as the entity with the right to enforce. It wasn't a fantasy. It wasn't a metaphor. It was law. I called the servicer and initiated the transfer process. The representative on the line didn't care who I was, only what my paperwork said. At the end of the call, she said, "Once boarded, you'll receive access to the investor portal. You can then provide borrower instructions." Borrower instructions. I sat down at my kitchen table and looked at the calendar. Christmas Eve was the next day. The symmetry was sharp enough to cut. That evening, my mother left a voicemail, voice tight with forced cheer. "Hi, sweetheart. We're doing Christmas dinner at 6 tomorrow. Your father says, well, he says we should all be together. It's been too long. Can you come? And bring anything you've learned about the bank situation. Together." Like that word hadn't been used as a lock before. I didn't call back. Instead, I drafted a letter. Not emotional. Not dramatic. Professional. Borrower notice of servicing transfer and demand for payment. I included the new payment address, the updated contact information, the current reinstatement amount, the deadline, and I attached copies of the recorded assignment once it was filed. Receipts, delivered. On Christmas Eve morning, I drove to the county recorder's office and filed the assignment. Then I went to a shipping store and sent the letter certified mail, return receipt requested. I paid extra for the tracking. I wanted proof of delivery. I wanted time-stamped. I wanted undeniable. At 2:07 p.m., the tracking updated. Out for delivery. At 4:19 p.m. Delivered. Signed by M. Harlan. My mother. I sat in my car in a grocery store parking lot and stared at the notification until the screen dimmed. Somewhere, in the same house that had deadbolted me out, my mother had signed for a letter that would change the power dynamic forever. I went home, made myself tea, and waited. The call came at 5:02 p.m. My father's name flashed on my screen. He'd never called me first in his life. I answered on the second ring. "Hello?" His voice was hoarse, furious, and edged with something I rarely heard from him. Fear. "What is this?" he demanded. "What did you do?" I leaned back, calm as ever, and looked at the copy of the assignment on my table. "I bought your mortgage," I said. Silence. Then, a breath like he'd been punched. "You can't do that," he said, as if denial was a legal defense. "I can," I replied. "And I did. It's recorded." His voice rose, scrambling for the old authority. "Why would you do this to us? After everything you did," I corrected, still quiet. He tried to pivot. "This is family. You're being vindictive." I smiled into the phone, not warmly. Precisely. "This is business," I said. "You taught me that." On Christmas Eve, my father's anger was always a performance. A way to occupy space so no one noticed his fear. After I said, "This is business," he tried to fill the silence with volume. "You think you're clever?" he snapped. "You think you can humiliate us? Your mother is crying. It's Christmas Eve. What kind of daughter does this?" "The kind you trained," I thought. Out loud I said, "The kind you evicted." "That was different," he said immediately, like reflex. "Daniel needed—" "Stop," I cut in. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "If you want to talk about what's different, we can do it with dates and documents." He made a sound in his throat. A frustrated growl. "You're enjoying this." I looked at the tea cooling on my table, the steam fading. I looked at the certified mail receipt and the signed proof of delivery. I looked at the assignment stamped and recorded. Enjoying wasn't the word. This wasn't pleasure, it was alignment. Like a bone sliding back into place after years of being wrong. "I'm not enjoying it," I said. "I'm correcting it." My mother's voice appeared in the background, shrill and wet. "Give me the phone. Give me—" There was shuffling, then her voice, close to the receiver. "Sweetheart, please. Please don't do this. We can fix it. We'll make it right." It was the first time she'd used that phrase. Make it right. Like a vague promise could undo an action with a date attached. "How?" I asked. She sniffed. "We'll talk. We'll apologize. Your father didn't mean—" "He drafted an eviction notice," I said, and my tone went sharper only because the truth was sharp. "He spelled my name wrong on it. You threw my clothes into snow." A pause. Then a small, strangled sound, like she was trying to rewrite the memory in real time. "We were under stress," she whispered. "Daniel. Daniel isn't here," I said. "And you still called me?" That landed. I could hear it in the way she stopped breathing for a moment. My father cut back in, trying to seize the wheel. There it was. The first honest question anyone in that house had asked me in years. I didn't answer with a dramatic monologue. I answered like a lender. "I want the house resolved," I said. "You have options. You can reinstate, if you can pay the arrears and fees. You can negotiate a modification if you qualify. Or you can sell." My father scoffed, but it sounded weak. "You're not going to foreclose on your own parents." "I'm not your child in this transaction," I said. "I'm the lienholder." My mother started crying in earnest then, the kind of crying meant to make someone feel guilty. It worked on me once, years ago, when I still believed guilt was proof of love. Now, it only confirmed that she still thought emotion was currency. I let her cry for a few seconds. Then I said, "I'm going to say this once. I will not discuss this by phone again. Everything goes through email. Everything goes through writing. If you want to propose a plan, put it in writing. If you want to dispute the assignment, have your attorney contact mine." My father barked. "Attorney?" "Yes," I said. "I retained counsel." Again business. He went quiet after that. I ended the call and set my phone down. My hands were steady. That was how I knew I was doing the right thing. If this had been revenge, I would have been shaking. Instead, I opened my laptop and wrote an email to both of them. Subject: loan status and next steps. I attached the assignment, the current reinstatement quote, and a one-page summary of options with deadlines. I wrote it in plain language. No insults, no history, just facts. Then I did something I didn't expect to do. I added a second email, separate, to my mother only. Subject: one personal note. And I wrote, "I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing it so you can't hurt me again. If you want a relationship, it starts with accountability, not requests." I didn't attach anything to that one. Just words. The rarest kind of receipt. Over the next week, the fallout came in waves. First, denial. My father emailed with the tone of a man trying to regain dominance through capitalization. "This is illegal. You are harassing us. We will fight this." I forwarded it to my attorney. My attorney responded with 2 paragraphs and 3 citations, politely reminding him that the assignment was valid and recorded, and that all communication should remain professional. Second, bargaining. My mother sent a long email at 2:13 a.m. She wrote about how hard they'd worked, how Daniel had struggled, how families made mistakes. She slipped in 2 lines about my temper, as if my calm boundary setting was a personality defect. I printed it and put it in the binder. Then I replied with a single sentence. "If you want to discuss the past, we can do it after the loan is resolved." Third, desperation. Daniel finally surfaced. He called me New Year's Day. I let it go to voicemail. He texted immediately. "What is wrong with you? Mom says you're taking the house. You're going to make them homeless?" I stared at the message and thought about the snowy lawn, about my socks soaking through, about the deadbolt click. I texted back, "You mean like what happened to me on December 24, 5 years ago?" He didn't respond for an hour. Then, "That was different." Of course. Always different when it's done to me. I didn't argue. I sent him a screenshot of my mother's text from 5 years ago. "Don't make this harder than it has to be. We're still family." Then I sent another screenshot. His own message accusing me of lying about being kicked out. And finally, I typed, "I keep receipts. Don't contact me again, unless it's in writing about the loan." That was the last time Daniel tried to bully me. He wasn't built for paper trails. By mid-January, reality finally settled in. My parents couldn't reinstate. They didn't have $8,741.62 plus fees. They couldn't modify because their income documentation was a mess. My father had been between opportunities more often than he admitted. My mother's part-time work didn't cover what the bank demanded. So they asked about selling. We scheduled a meeting at my attorney's office. Neutral ground. Witnesses, cameras in the lobby, sign-in sheet, everything documented. When they walked in, I almost didn't recognize them. Not because they looked older, though they did, because they looked smaller. My father avoided my eyes. My mother kept twisting her wedding ring like she could spin time backward. They sat across from me at a conference table. My attorney sat beside me. Their attorney sat beside them, expression flat, already tired. My father cleared his throat. "We want to resolve this." I nodded. "Good." My attorney slid a proposed resolution across the table. A short sale agreement where my LLC would accept a discounted payoff in exchange for releasing the lien, with conditions. One condition was non-negotiable: a written acknowledgement of the eviction and the fraudulent credit account, along with a commitment to repay any verified damages. Not because I needed the money, because I needed the truth to exist on paper. My father's face reddened. "That's ridiculous." I didn't react. I pointed gently to the clause. "If you want the lien released, you sign." Their attorney read it, lips pressed thin. He glanced at my father. "It's not unusual to have settlement terms." My father turned to my mother, as if hoping she'd soften me. My mother's eyes met mine, and, for the first time in years, she didn't reach for anger. She reached for honesty, though it came out trembling. "Did you really keep all of it?" she whispered. "All those messages?" "Yes," I said. "I had to." My mother's mouth opened, then closed. The room was quiet enough that I could hear the air conditioner click. My father finally asked, low, "What happens if we don't sign?" My attorney answered for me. "Foreclosure proceeds." That word did what emotions couldn't. It forced a decision. They signed. Ink on paper. Accountability with a timestamp. The house sold 3 months later. Not to me. I didn't want their home. I wanted their leverage. The sale closed. The lien was released. My investor was paid back with his return. And my LLC walked away with a profit that wasn't life-changing, but was symbolically perfect. Money is loud, control is quieter. After the sale, my parents moved into a rental 2 towns over. My mother tried to keep contact at first, sending photos of the new place, like decorations could cover shame. My father went silent. He couldn't speak to me without acknowledging that the daughter he'd treated like disposable had outlearned him. Daniel posted vague quotes online about toxic people and betrayal. He never mentioned specifics. He never mentioned dates. He never mentioned documents. Because he couldn't. As for me, I bought another property that year. Then another. I hired an assistant. I upgraded my systems. I kept my binder, though it turned into digital folders with backups in 3 places. Sometimes I still think about that snowy lawn. Not with sadness. With clarity. That night didn't break me. It revealed the rules. They thought they were throwing me out of the family. What they actually did was remove the last reason I had to protect their feelings over my future. 5 years later, when the bank came for their house, the new owner wasn't a stranger. It was the daughter they left in the cold. And the last receipt was simple. Delivered. Signed. Recorded.